All right. Welcome to the Black Vault Live. Thank you to everybody who is tuning in live. Hello to everyone on the YouTube channel. I see quite a few people already in here, quite a few messages as well. As always, if you could go ahead and just let me know that you can hear and see everything okay, that would be absolutely phenomenal. I see a lot of congratulations in there. I appreciate that, guys. It's been a heck of a week here in the last 7 days or so since I published the first of a couple stories, and we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But obviously on September 10th, for those of you who are not aware, I had published a story with statements from the United States Navy. And in short, the United States Navy finally went on the record and they confirmed a couple different things. First and foremost, the videos that we have been seeing in the media are in fact designated officially by the United States military, namely the United States Navy, who owns those videos, are the ones that shot them. They are considered unidentified aerial phenomena. That is a fairly mind-blowing thing to happen. Now, obviously, some of the TTSA fans out there that have been following this story, well, they knew that already, and that was enough for them to have TTSA say, hey, these are UFO videos, these are UAPs, and that was it. That's okay for some people. If that's what they want, if that is all the proof that they need, that's great, right? I'm not here to tell people how to think. But to have an official word, to have the United States Navy go on the record and say, these are UFOs, these are unidentified objects, we don't know what they are, that to me is where it starts to get interesting. That to me is something that is fairly mind-blowing, because as we go through the quotes, which I promised you all, I will go through each and every one of them. I'm fairly confident that I had published 100% of most of it, which isn't 100%. So you might see some new stuff here. But in the writing of the story, number one, which was September 10, and then a second story followed by me on September 11, I had quite a few different statements to go through and to go over in those stories. So obviously some things get trimmed up and so on, but we will go over everything to you. Now, that was the 10th and 11th of September. Obviously, it took a couple of days for the news to hit the mainstream. That's not totally uncommon. I've seen it a couple times on the Black Vault, mainly with the mind control documents that I posted late last year. That went super viral around the world a couple years ago with the Project Blue Book stuff, which was wildly misrepresented by the media. I've had a gripe with the media, not all the time, but sometimes with some outlets on the way that they treat these stories and the lack of attention and care to the facts. Well, that was a prime example of it. But it usually takes the mainstream media a couple days to kind of catch up, see, hey, this is something that's newsworthy, and actually publish it. So the last 2 days have been incredibly exciting, not only for me just to kind of see the attention the story is getting, but obviously for the world. People want to know about these UFOs. They want to know, what is the military saying? Obviously, they have gone on the record in generality. And what I mean by that is the Department of Defense, through the Pentagon, said, yes, we investigate UFOs. That story was broken by Stephen Greenstreet at the New York Post. Obviously, they went on the record with Brian Bender at Politico and said, we are reissuing guidelines. Although it was reported as new, that was a little bit incorrect. They were reissued guidelines from 2015 that they were issuing again this year, just updated. But they, again, generally talked about UFOs/UAPs. This is really the first time that people... Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate that. Thanks for that support through the super chat. This is the first time that they have looked at something and pointed their finger at something and said, these videos are UFOs. This is what we consider a unidentified aerial phenomena. That is really what the newsworthy story is this week. They also solidified the fact that they did not release the videos to the public. So in essence, you were never supposed to see them. And we'll get into what the classification is and how the Navy addresses all of that. Now, I'm sure you're probably all very surprised to see, and I'm going to try and watch this chat as well as I can. So I'm going to move a couple windows here. So just bear with me. I'm going to watch the chat as well as I can, but I've got a PowerPoint presentation which will allow me to better illustrate and read to you the exact quotes. That way you guys can see the context. You can see how I was able to reach out to the Navy and how it all came to pass. So again, I will try and watch those chat messages. As we know from last time, that is incredibly hard for me to do. So I will have in just a little bit a text message, or a text number, excuse me, that you can send in your messages, and also a toll-free call-in line. So you'll be able to call in with your questions towards the end. But I think that it is worthwhile because we have a lot of new people to the Black Vault. You just learned about the Black Vault. You may have just learned about UFOs and you have no idea what the news is. So I'm going to do a brief overview. Don't worry, this isn't going to go long. I've got some other video resources on this very YouTube channel if you're watching it. So help me out. Make sure you click on that subscribe button somewhere down on the bottom of your screen there. Click on the subscribe button, but also check out some of the other videos because I go in great depth on some of these issues that I'm going to more just give you the brief overview. Okay, so let me first start with figuring out how to even turn this slideshow on here. Bear with me here. Just bear with me here. Technical difficulty. I'm just making sure that I can actually get the slides to turn. Okay. So just a brief overview for those who really aren't aware of what is going on. So we are talking about 3 different UFO videos, a couple of which appeared in December of 2017, and then a third which appeared March of the next year. These, again, are often reported on in the mainstream media, a little bit less nowadays, but they are often referred to. And these are the 3 videos that we're going to be talking about. First and foremost, there's one called the FLIR 1. This is also the Nimitz Tic Tac incident. You may have heard the Tic Tac UFO encounter. Well, this is that video from that very incident. This was released December 16, 2017. The gimbal video was the second. These both were on December 16, 2017, published by both the New York Times and To the Stars Academy. So this is really what the world was introduced to by the New York Times and TTSA. You'll hear me refer to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. That's Tom DeLonge's group, for those who aren't aware. You'll hear me refer to that as TTSA. That is a heck of a lot easier to say than that full mouthful each and every time. So TTSA and the New York Times published these 2 videos. A few months thereafter, on March 9th, 2018, the third video, the Go Fast video, was released to the general public. So that is finishing off the trifecta of videos that we often hear about. Now, we know for a fact that Mr. Luis Elizondo, who is a board member of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, is the one that spearheaded the movement to get these videos out into the public. Now, the controversy is when the documentation actually surfaced. First, it was a leak. Then it became official through the Freedom of Information Act that there was no evidence that these 3 videos were released. Now, the leak came, I don't have the date in front of me, but George Knapp from KLAS Television first leaked it, and it's called a DD Form 1910. The name of the requester was blacked out, but it clearly had described the 3 videos that I just showed you as drones and balloons. In more specifics, UAVs, which is unmanned aerial vehicle. This is the DD Form 1910. So you can see here UAV, or unmanned aerial vehicles, balloons, and other UAS, or unmanned aerial systems, or aircraft systems, depending upon which definition you listen to. But it is unmanned aircraft system or aerial system. The leak had this blacked out, but this is a screenshot of the official release. Mr. Luis Elizondo was the one that filed the paperwork. This here is part of the controversy. Again, this will play a role in what's coming up. However, just to kind of give you that brief overview, in the DD Form 1910, Mr. Elizondo had to fill out why exactly he was requesting this information to be released and how was he going to display it. In this particular document, he states not applicable, and that is in relation to how he's going to present or publish the data. So presentation/publication data, not applicable, not for publication. Research and analysis only, and info sharing with other United States government or USG and industry partners for the purposes of developing a database to help identify, analyze, and ultimately defeat UAS threats. Now again, UASs generally refer to drones or unmanned systems where you have a drone and an operator. That is a more specific technical UAS definition. So what he did here was something that I felt was very noble. Before the Navy comments came, I assumed that this was kind of the nail in the coffin, that these 3 videos represented something that was very explainable, that it was something that they knew exactly what it was. One of the key parts here on the, excuse me, just switching windows here, on the DD Form 1910 was this section where it says OCA is Navy. Now, OCA is Original Classifying Authority. Now, what does that mean in plain English? Well, whenever a document is created, you have a classification. Could simply be unclassified, could be secret, could be top secret. The OCA, or Original Classifying Authority, is the one that placed the classification, whatever it is, on those 3 videos. This is what cued me in. For my FOIA people out there, obviously these are the little details that mean something when you start researching these types of topics. You need to know who the OCA was. You will see when using the FOIA, you will see OPR a little bit more often than OCA. OPR means Office of Primary Responsibility. That means that they are the ones, in this case the Navy, the ones to review the material for release to the public. So they were the ones that were responsible for classifying it, and ultimately the ones that were responsible for reviewing it for the general public if it were to be released. So again, from an investigative standpoint, this was one of the most important parts of the document, because even though we knew it was kind of assumed, they're from F-18 pilots and obviously naval exercises out at sea, it makes sense that it would be the Navy. But from a legal standpoint, you can't just say, well, I assume that it's a Navy video. Sadly, it doesn't work like that. And so what you have to do is you have to use these little bits of information. You've heard me say it before if you've tuned in to see me speak. You've heard me say it before that the minutia matters, the details matter, and this is why. Because this now gives me a legal standing to go to the Navy and say, these are your videos. It's irrefutable, unless you want to go against what this official document says. Past that is what essentially opened the door for me to start asking the Navy specific questions on this very topic. And that's why that particular page is important. In the FOIA release was another string of emails. Now, for those who are interested, I have a, again, admittedly lengthy video, but I went through all of these documents that show how the process took place. So the DD Form 1910 is just one step of the process, and it's really the primary step. But in this particular case, Mr. Elizondo started communicating back and forth with DOPSR. That is the organization within the DoD that manages all security reviews. This was the key email. So again, this is just a review, but if you're interested in all of the emails, I have a video on this channel for it. This was the key email, which was the latest in the string, meaning the last in line, the last one that was written in this release. In it, this was in response to Mr. Elizondo stating, contrary to what the DD Form 1910 stated, he said, let's just go ahead and, if it's easier, make it a full unrestricted release. That way we can just release it to the public. That is what Mr. Elizondo said. I'm paraphrasing, but that was his email. DOPSR responded, and they said, Lou, if the service level OCA, remember, Original Classifying Authority, verifies to me, simple one-sentence email is fine, that removing the metadata from the videos makes them unclassified. Please feel free to move forward with the release. What this is potentially stating is if the Navy says, hey, look, if you strip all that data that's embedded into the digital file, and the Navy says if you strip all that away and we're fine with a public release, then DOPSR would sign off on it. The FOIA release did not produce that email. It did not show at all that that email or authorization by the OCA, in this case the Navy, was ever given. So that was the basis of me now reaching out to the Office of Public Affairs, because sometimes, even though the government and military is a little slow, the FOIA is usually very, very slow. So sometimes through public affairs, you can get some answers, not necessarily documents all the time. You can sometimes, but not usually. They more so give you statements. So this was potentially going to contradict reporting that I had done months ago on the DD Form 1910 and with official statements from the Pentagon that said, no, there was never any authorization for public release. This opened the door to pretty much give us that information that possibly there was authorization given. And so that was, again, the really kind of basis of me reaching out to the Navy, focusing in on the videos, focusing in on what was going on to try and figure out, what's going on here. What are we looking at when it comes to these videos? So that leads me to the Navy. I started writing them about a month ago to date, and it took literally this long, about 3+ weeks, to get the statements. Really, when I got them, I wrote my article right away and dropped it on the 10th. And then again, you'll see here coming up with the official statements, I went through and got some more additional statements, which then spawned a second story. And we'll get into that. So here's kind of the rough overview of how this took place. I'm not going to go through every email that I had with the Navy for obvious reasons. It would just be long and boring. But what I will show you is what I wrote in brief. These are screenshots because I do have a spelling error, maybe even more than one. But in the interest of accuracy, these are screenshots of the exact text that took place. These are not my slides with text per se, and I typed it out. Again, just in the interest of accuracy, this is exactly the screenshot of what I received from the Navy. Highlighted in blue is going to be the words of the Navy, and not highlighted at all is going to be me. So we'll go through the statements one by one here, just so you guys can understand the context of how the Navy gave it and also what it essentially means. So I had originally sent 5 questions. I'm going to go through all 5 along with the official Navy responses. First question, did the Navy respond to DOPSR's request to approve an unrestricted release authority to Mr. Elizondo in regards to these 3 videos? If so, does that email grant an unrestricted public release for these videos? Obviously, this stems from that exchange. There was a open-ended, unanswered question that possibly they responded. The Navy looked, and they stated, neither the cognizant Navy offices nor DOPSR have record of any correspondence responding to a request for unrestricted release of the subject videos in 2017. What this means is this is the nail in the coffin to then close out any doubt, unless somebody wants to go on the record and say they're lying here, which is fine, but you got to bring proof to the table. So this is that nail in the coffin that these videos were never supposed to be out in the public. There was never any appropriate review. The emails show that through FOIA. The Pentagon stated that in official statements months ago, and now the Navy shut it down. They said, nope, there is absolutely no response or evidence that we gave that approval. So that is now done. My second question, Mr. Luis Elizondo described the videos on the DD Form 1910 as UAV, balloons, and other UAS. In addition, Mr. Elizondo's emails describe the videos in generality as, quote, balloons, commercial UAVs, private drones such as quadcopters, etc. That is a quote from his email, by the way. Does the Navy agree these are the proper identifiers to describe the reference FLIR 1, gimbal, and Go Fast videos? Yes, I know gimbal is misspelled. This obviously, my intent was fairly straightforward. I'm looking to see why there was such a public discrepancy between the public story, the story that we were fed by TTSA about these being UAPs or UFOs or proof that there's something in our skies we can't identify, and the documentation that was written by Mr. Luis Elizondo and his own words. That is something that was a huge discrepancy, and it still is, regardless of the statement that you're about to see. But that is a huge discrepancy that I believe should be addressed. I would love to know why the official designation differs in Mr. Elizondo's paperwork. This is also where I started to assume, and this is a lesson to us all, that you can never assume what you're going to get. I assumed the Navy, this was the Navy's out. This was going to be where the Navy was going to say, yes, we agree with the assessment of them being drones or balloons or whatever, and close the door at that. Maybe even say, we know what the technology is, but it's classified, no comment. Rather, the Navy started opening up a little bit. In this specific response, they say the Navy has not publicly released characterizations or descriptions, nor released any hypothesis or conclusions in regards to the objects contained in the referenced videos. So, contrary to what I thought I was going to get, they started giving me answers that were a little bit different. Now, don't worry, because they go in a little bit more detail. My third question, Mr. Elizondo and to the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, describe these three videos as UFOs or UAPs and not with the same description as Mr. Elizondo on official paperwork. So obviously I'm pushing a little bit more here with detail to see how much detail I can get in return. Can the Navy comment on the claims made by TTSA that these videos represented as UFOs/UAPs by them and the fact that they were described in a much different way on official documents? This was the kicker for me. The Navy states, the Navy has no comment on, nor control over, how civilian individuals or organizations may or may not describe the objects in the referenced videos. The Navy designates the objects contained in these videos as unidentified aerial phenomena. Additionally, the Navy's official identifiers for the referenced videos do not match the names referenced, in parentheses, FLIR 1, Gimbal, and Go Fast. The Navy identifies these videos by their respective dates of the observations/sightings. Now, dissecting this real quick, the first part of that, Navy, no comment nor control over how civilian individuals or organizations may or may not describe the objects. I had said this in a past live stream, and I believe that this kind of proves it, where First Amendment rights are going to secure you whether you come out and lie or come out and tell the truth. As long as you're not encroaching on any security oaths that you've taken or any clearance that you might have. And the other legal thing is, as long as you're not acting as a spokesperson, the First Amendment will likely cover you. So the Navy's just willing to blanket say, we got no control over how TTSA or civilians represent the video. Nor does it sound like they care, which is kind of interesting. But that second part, the Navy designates the objects contained in these videos as unidentified aerial phenomena. I'll be honest with you guys, I did not expect that at all. Again, they had an out. They had the out of saying, yes, we know what these things are. It's maybe classified technology, no comment past that, or whatever, and shut this down. And they didn't do it. That they went on the record and said, these three videos are unidentified aerial phenomena. The third part about the identifiers for the referenced videos and how FLIR 1, Gimbal, and Go Fast are not the official designators, which, you know, is kind of no shock. That's not how they're going to name their videos. Put a pin in that because I'm going to go back to it in one of the follow-ups. But obviously that middle section is the absolute kicker. That is what has gotten all of the media attention. Fourth question, I have a statement from OSD, that's Office of the Secretary of Defense. That is where Mr. Elizondo has said to have worked, and that is not in dispute. What is in dispute is that he did not work on the ATIP program, nor did he have any responsibilities. That was the statement from OSD. So back to my question. I have a statement from OSD regarding the videos, which I will also put below for reference. Again, I'm just gave him some attachments. I'd like to ask, since the Navy was the OCA for them, meaning the videos, if you could comment as well. In question form, meaning sometimes public affairs require questions versus conversation. So that's why I put it like that. In question form, according to the U.S. Navy, were the videos labeled as FLIR 1, Gimbal, and Go Fast ever released to the public, or was the approval only for internal use? This, again, seems redundant, and you're pretty much right. What you do here, though, is you obviously are looking for accuracy, that you're not reading into statements, that you're not trying to make things up, you're not assuming. We see that a lot in the media nowadays, especially with bloggers who kind of pretend they know what they're talking about and start reporting on things that they don't know about. So this is my effort to really just kind of double check, and in some cases triple check, which you'll see coming up. The Navy stated simply, the Navy has not released the videos to the general public. Again, nail in the coffin, but it was a cut and dry, clean statement that said our evidence absolutely shows what we know to be true, which is there was no release to the public. My fifth question on this round. If the answer to number 4 is that the videos were not meant for public release, which again, I kind of assumed at that point, can you tell me the security classification of the videos at the time they were requested and the security classification as it stands right now if it has changed? I was also very surprised at this. The 3 videos were/are designated as unclassified. Now that may make you scratch your head and go, well, then why does it matter if they are released to the public or approved for release to the public, or whatever it may be? And it's actually very important. Even though something, either a video, a document, a photograph, is unclassified or can be unclassified, it does not mean that you can release it to the public. It largely means that although it does not have a classification, it can still be sensitive. We see this largely referenced as for official use only. So it's unclassified / for official use only. And so when somebody files a FOIA or maybe public affairs stumbles across it, it's FOUO, and at this point it needs a review before it goes out. In this particular case, those 3 videos were unclassified, but as indicated by the evidence that came out through FOIA, they had information that was embedded inside the digital file that is called metadata. And that metadata is potentially what created a sensitivity behind the videos. I say potentially, it's pretty much proven by looking at the emails that the metadata was what was kind of the question mark. So not to repeat myself, but for those just joining, I do have a video on this channel. I hope you do consider subscribing. There's a button down there below me where you can look at that video, and it is a much lengthier, much more detailed presentation on all of the emails, not just the one that I went over. But anyway, this was a very big surprise for me, simply because I assumed, yet again, wrong to do that, but it's why you ask questions. I assumed that they held a classification, which is why they were holding so firm to the fact that they were not publicly released. So to my surprise, they were unclassified, but obviously they still require a review for release, and that never happened. So those were the first 5 questions that I asked. You do try and limit it for any journalists that are tuning in right now. Obviously, I am not a journalist. I've never tried to be one, but I obviously make a lot of media appearances on television and radio. So my interest is very much in accuracy. Yes, I have started writing articles. I have a lot of fun doing that. But again, I don't go around boasting, hey, I'm a journalist. I'm a journalist. There's people much smarter than I am out there that are writing stories that are real journalists, and credit goes to them. But for me, I find a lack of caring for some of this information. And so what I try and do is make it accurate. And this last week is a prime example. Again, I'm not boasting to be a journalist. I wrote an article, put it out there, and it went viral. Literally, it is on every most major media outlets. Time magazine, shortly before I started this live stream, dropped their story on it. We have Fox News covering it. We have Vice News covering it. Popular Mechanics is covering it. Every British newspaper that I've seen is covering it. I've also seen it in 6 different languages so far. So it's getting quite a bit of attention. So that's my intention. That is my intent, and it always has been, is accuracy. Sadly, not all those media outlets were accurate. That is a different live stream in itself, but that interest is very much trying to make sure that you guys from the Black Vault get everything as truthful as I can make it. What the media does with it after that, that's a totally different ball game. But again, I try and really root everything in documented evidence and things that you can verify. What happens after that, again, is up to anybody's call. But in order to reach that accuracy that I just talked about and make sure that you guys are getting all of the information possible, I took those statements that I got and created some follow-ups. Because again, I wanted to make sure that I was accurate with taking what the Navy gave me and then giving it to you guys. A lot of times you might get a statement and go, aha, I know what he means. And you put it out there and may not necessarily mean exactly what you thought it was. So here's some follow-ups that I sent in. In A2, the spokesperson for the Navy, by the way, a quick comment, Mr. Joseph Gradisher, retired United States Navy captain. Really nice gentleman. He was very, very helpful and worked hard to get me the answers. Like I said, it took near a month. The way he responds is A1, A2, A3 designations. And so, question 1 will get an A1 answer. So that's why you're seeing these A1s, in case you're curious. In A2, you said the Navy has not publicly released characterizations or descriptions relating to the videos. In A3, you say the Navy designates the objects contained as unidentified aerial phenomena. My confusion is why Mr. Elizondo would identify the objects as UAVs, UASs, and balloons when the official Navy designation was UAP. Is there any explanation for this? So again, I was kind of already asking this, and I didn't get the answer I was looking for. But based on his statements, it created a little bit more confusion. In one statement, he's saying we're not releasing any characterizations, but in the next, he says they're UAPs. To me, that's a characterization. Maybe a little bit semantic, but that was a little bit confusing. So this is why you kind of paved the way and asked that question. The Navy stated, you have to contact Mr. Elizondo on his descriptions. I can't comment or speculate on how/why he referred to them in that way. I did reach out to Mr. Elizondo, so everybody is aware. In fact, I've reached out to him multiple times throughout the stories that I've written. It's all been ignored. I do write his personal address and also to the Stars Academy on the first, and this will come up towards the end, but in the first story that I did where the Navy came out and said, hey, these are UAPs, but you weren't meant to see them. I reached out to TTSA and including their not only Mr. Elizondo's private email address, but also the public TTSA address. They acknowledged that they received the letter. I never heard anything back. So my guess is it was someone who had no idea that they hate me. And so once they found out, they never responded again. So I never got any comments. So you'll notice in my stories that TTSA and Mr. Elizondo failed to respond to requests for comments. Sadly, I reach out every time and I've got all the proof of that, but sadly they don't want to respond, which is fine. Hopefully one day, though, they will address some of what we are going to be talking about. Here is, again, an effort to make sure that I am not misunderstanding anything. What I had asked Mr. Gradisher to sum it up and ensure accuracy. What is publicly referred to as the FLIR 1 gimbal and Go Fast videos are considered unidentified to the Navy. This is accurate. So I was making sure that I did not mess anything up, and I was not going to upset anybody if I start reporting this. The Navy says, here's the quote, the Navy considers the phenomena contained/depicted in those 3 videos as unidentified. That was a kicker statement, and I'm glad that I triple checked because it was clean, it was concise, it referred to these things as a phenomena, and they have no idea what it is. That to me is one of the better statements that I got that clearly shows the Navy, at least on the record anyway, will admit that they have no idea what these things are. And that to me is something that is pretty groundbreaking when it comes to this story overall, because you have these 3 videos. Now they're confirmed as UAPs, and the Navy's going on the record saying that they're a phenomena of some kind, and they have no idea what they are. So that was a double check that seemed, again, redundant, which produced a pretty awesome result. Lastly, is there any official definition in the form of a document or a statement that defines unidentified aerial phenomena? This is incredibly important on many levels. You've heard me talk about definitions in the past if you have tuned in before. The Department of Defense as a whole, which includes the Department of the Navy, Air Force, and so on, they are incredibly into definitions. There's a DoD manual that is all about definitions and acronyms, right? There's a dedicated manual just to that. And it is hundreds and hundreds of pages of definitions and acronyms. And you'll hear me say quite a few acronyms today, and I try to explain them as I go. and it gets very confusing. But there are hundreds and hundreds of pages of definitions in the DoD manuals. That's pretty amazing. So definitions are very, very important to this debate. I looked in the most recent copy of the DoD manual. UAPs is not in it. That probably will change soon. I would bet, since there are official acknowledgments to UAPs as a designator, that will change. And I look forward to that. But that was my intent, reaching out to the Navy and saying, okay, you guys are throwing around the term now, unidentified aerial phenomena, but what is it? And by the way, this is actually cool. I've never said this, and in fact, some people may have assumed it. I don't know. But while talking on the phone with Mr. Gradisher in one of our conversations, we all are saying UAPs. I continue to say UAPs. To the military, at least to the spokesperson, they refer to them as UAPs. So, that's a little kind of fun tidbit for you. But yeah, UAPs is how they is how they refer to it as, not UAPs. Regardless, I'm sure UAPs will probably be a little bit more popular in the mainstream, but it sounds like to the military, UAPs is the way to refer to it. Here's what Mr. Gradisher says on behalf of the Navy. The unidentified aerial phenomena terminology is used because it provides the basic descriptor for the sightings/observations of unauthorized/unidentified aircraft/objects that have been observed entering/operating in the airspace of various military-controlled training ranges. Never seen so many slashes in a sentence, but there you have it. That is the first time that I am aware of that the Navy put a official definition to what a UAP or UAP actually is. That was incredibly important for less for the news, more so for the information, more so for people like me that are investigating these things. For those of you who may be listening that are utilizing the FOIA, trying to track things down, that type of information is needed. So now we have a baseline for how the Navy classifies these objects and how they define them. So now this was pushing forward a little bit on uncovering what this information is. So that completed story number 1. That dropped on September 10th. That is all of the information that you have been seeing. So that being said, that really was the most newsworthy aspect of last week's revelations. It really was. However, there was still a lot of more important information to come from the investigative aspect. Now, this includes dates of the specific cases of what those 3 videos represent. Now, let me say up front, we've known about the Tic Tac incident and the exact date for quite some time. So there was no revelation here. So what I wanted to do, since I had the Navy on the record now stating that these cases were UAPs, was to push a little bit more and say, okay, so now that you've addressed that these are actual cases, and these are things that are worthy of investigation, but they're classified, obviously, can you at least release the dates? And the Navy statement was, as previously stated, the Navy identifies the reference videos, FLIR 1, Gimbal, and Go Fast, by the respective dates of the observations/sightings via those stated file names. So remember when I told you to put a pin in that statement? This is where we call back to it. The Navy continued, those dates are 14 November 2004 for FLIR 1. So again, that's the Tic Tac. We already knew that. That's not a revelation. But now it's official, so that's good. And 21 January 2015 for both the Gimbal and the Go Fast video. Now, that closes the debate on was Gimbal and Go Fast on the same day. That has been a rumor to some circles that they were on the same day, simply because for 2 reasons. The voices of the pilot or pilots, it was undetermined, sounded incredibly similar. So the question mark was this film the same day? Is it the same pilot? There's talk about the voices being dubbed in. I'll admit it. I have that question because there's certain things that don't sound right. But regardless, it is now solidified that they were definitely the same day. So Gimbal and Go Fast were the same day. Oh, and the other reason why it was rumored was the heads-up display. So if you were, let me make sure my hands are in the right area, but as I almost knock over my There we go. So the heads-up display inside the frame of the UFO video, people analyze that. Again, people much smarter than me, probably with a military background, understanding what they're talking about, and determined from that it was likely the very same day. Now, this was confirmation that it was, in fact, the same day. So these were the two. Just a reminder, this was gimbal over here, go fast over here. So I pushed a little bit harder. Here's what I said. Very helpful, thank you. And I'm not sure if the Navy has addressed this, but are the exact/approximate locations known? I know Flare 1 is said to be off the coast of San Diego, and TV shows have roughly pinpointed it, but has the Navy ever commented on the locations? If not, can they? Thanks again for all of this. Mr. Gradisher was pretty straightforward. We will not be providing any details on individual reports. And that was it. So he shut that off and would not give out any more details. So at least we inched a little bit closer. We got a little bit closer to the truth behind what was going on. Again, the FLIR 1 was already known, but at least we now know that it was the same incident with the gimbal and the go fast. But I didn't stop there. I continued to kind of push for answers. This was leading into then a third story, which I have published. This was just, let me see, I believe yesterday. It's been a crazy couple days. I believe it dropped yesterday morning. And this has largely been overlooked simply because of the enormous amount of publicity that all the other statements that I got, the publicity that those statements got. So this has largely been overlooked. But what I was able to do is get the Navy to go on the record about the fact that the FLIR 1 video was leaked back in 2007. So contrary to everything that you've heard about it being the first released on December 16th, 2017, and TTSA got it declassified, all of that is actually wrong. The video was online, and it's provable back in 2007. I wrote an article about this. I invite you all to read it. I won't go over all of the nitty-gritty details, but on the Wayback Machine, which is, if you're not aware, it's part of the Internet Archive, and what they do is they create snapshots of the Internet at random intervals. So they'll download websites and articles and so on, and then store it onto their servers. And so on Wayback Machine, you can actually go back and download the FLIR 1 video as it stood on the Internet back in 2007. So the Navy went on the record with this as well. With respect to the 2004 sighting by aircraft from the aircraft carrier USS Nimitz, or CVN-68, that video was widely shared throughout the ship at the time. In 2007, one of those crew members posted the video on the public web. In 2009, the online post of the video came to the attention of Navy officials who, in consultation with Navy law enforcement personnel, decided not to pursue the matter. Given the time since recording, approximately 5 years, the widespread distribution of the recording within the ship at the time of the recording, and the size of the crew at the time, approximately 5,000, it was determined that there was no way to accurately determine who might have released the video. Now, that's a long statement, obviously, and a little bit dry, but here's the importance behind it. It proves that the Navy absolutely cares about these videos being out into the public, even if they are unclassified. From an investigative standpoint, when they looked into it, there were 5,000, this is my word, not the Navy, but essentially 5,000 suspects that could have leaked that video. And so what is the Navy going to do? They're going to interview 5,000 people? Where were you on the night of? Kind of thing. And the likelihood behind that producing anything worth their time, in my opinion, would probably be pretty nil. And so they opted against it. Now, when I read this, of course, I am going to ask about the gimbal and go fast, because those weren't, as far as I know, ever leaked prior to December of 2017 and March of 2018. And Mr. Elizondo is largely credited by hundreds and hundreds of news outlets as the guy that put that out. Spearheaded the movement. TTSA is taking credit for those videos. It's fairly straightforward. But now that the Navy is going on the record and the Pentagon has gone on the record and says, no, you're never supposed to see those, I started asking about that as well. Now, let me just back up. So I started asking about that and saying, are you going to investigate that as well? Or are you, or can you comment? And I forgot to put the slide up there. I'm sorry about that. That's what I was looking for. But it was very short and sweet. You can see it in the article as well. It was essentially, we are not going to comment on the two other videos. So they shut down any way for me to ask for information. So I apologize that I did not make that slide for you guys. But again, it was a one-liner, decline to comment type of deal. You'll see that in the written article as well. But this was largely overlooked simply because of, again, that massive publicity for everything else, for everything else that was received last week. I want to give a shout out. I don't know who actually got this quote first. I did get it from Mr. Gradisher, so it is legit. But the definition that I had read to you before, somebody started asking a few more questions, and so Mr. Gradisher either changed that statement, didn't alter the meaning. That may be a poor way to say it, but more expanded it on the definition of a UAP. He sent this over to me so I could disseminate it as well. I want to give the shout out to at least Roger Glazel, who's a blogger from Sweden who does a lot of great work pressing for answers as well. So I think that he may have been the first one to get this. I don't know. But regardless, I want to shout him out anyway because he does a lot of great work. Don't know if you're in the room, Roger, but shout yourself out if you're watching live. But definitely he is a blog to look into. But I'll read this to you guys because, again, I did not publish this. I haven't written an article since I got this statement from Mr. Gradisher. I probably won't, simply because I think it's just an expanded version of what we already went through. But it's interesting nonetheless. Unidentified aerial phenomena is a term we borrowed from the UK. It's any aerial phenomenon that cannot immediately be identified. The wide proliferation and availability of an inexpensive unmanned aerial systems, UAS, isn't contradictory. It's just when the UAS is not immediately identifiable, we refer to it as a UAP. A quadcopter is immediately identifiable. As we've previously acknowledged, the number of incursions into our ranges has increased with that wide proliferation and availability of inexpensive UAS. Additionally, we use the generic UAP term in communications so as not to prejudge the results of any investigation. Any range incursion by unauthorized craft affects the safety of our aviators and/or the security of our operations. Our revised reporting guidance solicits reports of any unauthorized craft, UAP or UAS, observed within our ranges so that we may investigate that range incursion. Incursions/sightings since 2014 may be referred to as either UAS or UAP, depending upon the circumstances surrounding the specific incident in question. That's a mouthful, but I wanted to at least bring that to you guys as well so you had their slightly expanded definition of what unidentified aerial phenomena is. That is, again, very, very important that the Navy continues to go on the record and give us a little bit more information and give us a little bit more data that we can use, not only as an investigator, not only as journalists, but obviously curious minds as well. Here is something that I've referred to in the past. I thought I would throw this in just to show you guys. Back in 2016, I was pushing the Navy. I had no idea that all of these stories would unfold, but I was pushing the Navy under FOIA to get the UFO documents, UFO investigations of unidentified craft by NCIS. Now, that's the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And to my surprise, in 2016, they released quite a few documents to me. If you do watch that bigger presentation, or maybe you did already, one thing that I talked about in that is the fact that Mr. Elizondo's description in those emails about how he wanted to create a database about threats, something that they could use for reference, and so on, was really a great idea. I mean, I hope, regardless of how this all has turned out, and it's not necessarily exactly how these videos are really being depicted, rather they're UAPs, which I can't believe that actually happened, and not drones. I do hope that they carried the torch that Mr. Elizondo possibly lit while he was at OSD, because the documentation proves that there are drones that are encroaching on military installations, and NCIS had a small pile of documents to prove it. Here's one that happened, I believe, in 2014, 15 August 2014 to be exact. This was a drone that got into MCRD, that's the Marine Corps Recruiting Depot in San Diego. This is part of the report, and in the files I got released through FOIA, they even did a full law enforcement investigation. It's a really cruddy photocopy. Sadly, that's how they sent it to you. But you can see here they're taking pictures of the grounds, and here is the culprit itself, a quadcopter that encroached on MCRD. Now, I'm smiling when I say that, but these are very serious incidents. This particular one wasn't anything too serious. I think that they found, if I remember correctly, this was the incident where it was the dad and a son, and the drone got away from him. So it was no aerial surveillance or anything like that. But that's obviously where the security risks come in. These potential surveillance vehicles drop a weapon, a bomb of some kind, I should say, an explosive, fly in there and do some damage. That's where these security concerns come in. So these documents definitely prove that is what it was essentially all about when it came to the drones and the UASs. So back to Mr. Elizondo's words, I hope they do pursue that and create that database. But obviously this story took a turn that even I didn't expect, which was those 3 videos are absolutely UFOs or UAPs, and the Navy cannot identify it. Now, I did put the text number and also the toll-free call-in number on your screen. I will definitely take your calls if you're not aware the way that it works. If I can get you when you call in, I will do that. If not, you get put on hold. You'll hear some music. Sorry, I can't feed the live feed to you. So you just have to listen through your speakers. And then when I pull you on, make sure your volume is down. The text number is 661-888-2568. So again, make sure that you just text that number, 661-888-2568, or feel free to give me a call, 866-856-9722. Again, 866-856-9722. I will go ahead and answer whatever you've got. I'm going to go ahead and check the chat room here. Feel free to put these... I think I know who this might be. Give me 1 second here. Hey, Jesse.
Hi, John.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. I hope you don't mind me shouting out your first name there, Jesse.
No, of course. I have a couple of names. Don Eckert busted me about 7 years ago. So.
Oh, okay. Well, Jesse, the man, the man, the myth, the mystery. What can I do for you? Did I lose you?
Well,
oh, you're still here.
Comment number 1. Are you?
I got a bad cell phone connection. I think you might be on a cell phone, Jesse. I think I might be losing you.
John, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. First comment. We can all work together. Ufologists, old guard and new guard, even though the new guard has been very difficult on us.
Yes.
What you've been doing in the past 2 years on this particular case, the kind of flack, the haters we've been labeled as. We're not haters. We just want to get to the point here. If you're a shareholder in TTSA, how could you feel confident that you're getting qualified information on a timely basis as to what this company is up to? You are owners of this company. You get nothing. You get just as much as the DOD and the Pentagon gives you. Nada. These people have an agenda. We have no idea what it is. And they have taken over the UFO community and decided to demonize anyone that has been in the field for more than, I want to say, 10 years.
Yeah.
So that's the comment. It's not a gripe. It's a plea to New Guard folks. I created the New Guard Network, 10, 15 years ago. And here it is. There is a New Guard. And we all know who these kids are. And they're smart kids. I'm not a kid anymore. But I want to support them. They have to get real. This is not science fiction.
Yeah.
These people have an agenda that can be incredibly dangerous, John. So my question is, as the Robin Hood of ufology, almost the Tyler Durden at this point of ufology to a certain extent, the rebellion. I must ask you, when do you think TTSA will respond to any of this? They have been dead silent, as you have pointed out. When will they respond, and what do you, of course, you're just, stating what you think might happen. Predict for us.
Well, I don't know. I'm never good at predicting, as I went over on assumptions, which never work out too well. But here, you bring up a really interesting part of this entire topic and discussion, and that is TTSA. Now, these statements were brought up to TTSA. I think I briefly mentioned that, but to give a little bit more detail, before anyone ever knew. I received the statements from the Department of Navy, knew that it was fairly mind-blowing stuff, and it was not fair for me to report on it without reaching out to TTSA. I reached out to them, and when I asked them for comment and they acknowledged it, what I was looking for was comment on, what do you guys think now that these are UAPs, but also they're not released to the public? That is a big aspect to the story. And of course they acknowledged that, but then ignored me. I don't understand that, because here's why. Just today, Tom DeLonge posted a big image with all the logos of all of the news media outlets. Well, not all of them, but quite a few media outlets, and says that the Navy statements that I just went over to you are unprecedented. And he says that TTSA had a big day for their I forget how he termed it, but essentially their mission, their objective. Mm-hmm. And no credit, no shout out, no nod, no nothing. And I don't know what the story is, to go to your question now, because I wanted to preface it a little bit. What is up with that? There is a divide in this debate. And today, I think, proved that divide is endorsed by TTSA. I'm not trying to create a problem here, but I think that I've given TTSA nods. If for those who watch this show, you'll know that I've given them credit and support on multiple things, including what isn't even popular in the UFO field, that I agree with them that there is largely a threat narrative behind a lot of this, or threat potential, and they are highly criticized for that. I agree with them. So I think that divide at this point is endorsed by TTSA, given the fact that of all the people that could have written about this, I was the one that actually pushed. I'm very much known as a critic towards them, very hated by some of their bigger fans. Like you said, people just don't want any opposing views. And I never said TTSA wants that. And after today, I think it's kind of obvious. And so moving forward, will that divide ever go away? And I'm not sure. I gave them an opportunity to be involved in this story when I dropped it. Now, of course, they're involved because they brought the videos out. I get that, okay? So I'm not trying to take away from that. But what I mean is that I reached out to them to try and take the story to the next level. Mr. Elizondo knows things that I don't. He could definitely add to this story. But I think that in order for them to get rid of that divide, they have to address the other statements that they don't think are unprecedented. And that is one of the most fascinating, mind-blowing, depressing, frustrating things about this. Because we went over the really cool admissions by the U.S. Navy. But keep in mind, and Tom DeLonge thinks they're unprecedented, blasting out to 700,000 followers of his on Facebook alone, look at what TTSA is doing. I don't know what happened to the Black Vault there, but whatever. But that's right. That's the power of what he thinks is in regards to a official statement. But they refuse to respond to the official statements that go against their mission, that go against their claims. And I think today, going back to it, and I'll punch the note again, I think that they are endorsing this divide, and it's sad. The same reason that I give a nod to them, even though I'm highly critical for certain things, it's not that I want the pat on the back. It's to show that we can still work together, even though They don't like me and they don't want to talk to me. They had an opportunity to get involved with this story and they ignored me. When the mainstream media covered it, it's unprecedented. It's the most amazing thing that they have seen, and it's a huge day for them. That's a divide that we have to get over. Again, it's not about giving me a pat on the back. This is a good thing for all of us, but they should acknowledge that it's a good thing for all of us, and that they don't do that. So I hope the shareholders are happy. I really honestly do. I know some of them. They are absolutely great people to speak with. They're open to opposing ideas, and they support TTSA. But there is a group of people that needs to accept that there are opposing views, and TTSA is now endorsing this divide, and we have to get over it. We just do. So I don't know if that directly addressed your question, but I think the last day or so has proven we need to work on this. And if TTSA is watching, I tagged Tom DeLong when I announced this live stream. Tom, if you're watching, I'm here for you. I mean, I've got toll-free numbers that you can call, email addresses. I am the only one that operates the Black Vault. So any way you try and contact, you will reach me. They're always invited, but I think that we have to have a very serious conversation, because today proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, Tom DeLong and TTSA loves official statements. So what happens to the ones that they won't address? Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm going to say something finally. I always end up agreeing with about 98%. This time it was a little less because I differ with you on the threat. Uh-huh. However, it's my last comment to people who have issues with this group, this old guard, this diehard purist ufologist that exists. We're not going away. We're here to help. But ask yourselves this. Why are these people unavailable? Why are they hiding from answering any questions? Why are people that used to be our friends and people that we looked up to as journalists, investigative journalists, MUFON heads, have turned into trolls to a certain degree for banishing folks that say anything negative about this crew? This is not good. Ask yourselves how these folks are acting in secrecy land, and it seems like the black world to me. Thank you again, John, for taking my call, and keep it up.
Anytime, Jesse. I appreciate the call. Thank you.
Yes.
So, in closing on his statement, he's absolutely right. Like I said, that there are many TTSA supporters that I get along with. There's no problems. They are amazing people, just like you, just like me, just like everyone. Some are probably in this room. The problem, however, is the fact that you can't have a discussion with certain TTSA fans and followers, and that's the problem. And those are the ones that I refer to as that cultish mentality. You're either with us or against us, and that has to change. And I hope TTSA joins me in that and bridges the gap a little bit. Let's have a tough conversation, address some of these official statements that they want to ignore. Eric is sending in some texts. Eric asks, how do we know these are still not top secret drones? To me, it's just easier for the government now to call them UAP, so these drones can still be kept top secret. Also, So, Eric, you bring up an excellent point, and it is one that I am struggling with right now. Would the Navy find a better advantage to say they're unidentified and get all of this publicity to their statements, or would they just say this is classified technology? And I'm struggling with that one because I don't know the answer. I really don't. Is it possible? Absolutely, 100% possible. What I also think is a big possibility is the fact that the Navy doesn't know what these are, but maybe it's the Air Force doing some tests. Maybe a little less likely, but hey, that's a possibility too, that the Navy is going on the record because they're being kept in the dark, that the Air Force is testing and implementing top secret technology, drones, and capabilities that we just have no idea. What better way to figure out what those capabilities are than to test it against the strongest Navy and the strongest military on the planet? And that would be ourselves. But in order to truly test those capabilities, you can't tell everybody. You can't say, hey, by the way, there's a top secret drone that's going to be in this particular area, so make sure that you just, watch out for it. No, you can't do that, depending upon what capability they want to test. So they leave the Navy in the dark. And it could go to the highest echelon. I mean, we don't know. Again, not top of my list, but absolutely a possibility. So just because the Navy is saying that they are unidentified, we can't just jump to aliens. I know that that's a given to some, but we need to hear it too, and we need to say it. It does not necessarily mean extraterrestrials. But I will say, from my standpoint, this is a personal thought, and then I've got a caller. I'll get to you, Las Vegas. This is my personal thought, and that is, if the Navy, the strongest Navy, part of the strongest military on the planet, is willing to go on the record and say that they have no idea what it is, that to me is mind-blowing. I say it that way because of the strength of what they are saying by saying that these things are unidentified. I truly believe they would be better suited, if it is drone technology, even at the highest levels of classification, to just simply state these are classified pieces of technology being implemented and or tested. We have no further comment. That's it. And you would not have the publicity that you've had in the last day or two. So would they do that? Would they create a narrative that wasn't true? Because there is now more attention to the fact that there are unidentified things in our sky that the U.S. military can't identify, versus if they just said, yeah, this is classified technology. I'm sorry we can't comment, but we know what's going on, guys. Sleep well at night. That's a lot better in my opinion. But that didn't happen. So again, that's just an opinion. But Eric, you bring up an excellent question, and it's one that's unanswered. I can't answer it for you, but it's one we definitely have to consider. So my caller from Las Vegas, sorry to keep you on hold there for a couple minutes. Who's this?
Hi, this is Stephen Padilla.
Hey, Stephen Padilla, how are you?
Good, I'm good. Very good. A few questions real quick. I'm sitting here thinking, do you think the Navy anticipated or expected that that it would be admitting that these videos are UAPs, or at this moment? I mean, did they expect this? Did they expect that the videos were going to be released to the public and make a stir like this? I mean, do you think that they knew all this ahead of time?
Meaning, did they expect the media blitz of attention? Is that what
yes,
you...
and
yeah,
and them admitting that the videos are UAPs.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. Before the Time article, or Time magazine article, if you haven't seen this, it's one of the top great pieces of journalism on this. Time magazine just published this in the last couple of hours. They reached out to Joseph Gradisher, the spokesperson, to obviously authenticate what I had published, but ask a few more questions. And why I bring this up is, in that article, Mr. Gradisher said that he was surprised at the attention that the story got. And I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the quote in front of me, but he essentially says that he's glad at the attention because he wants to destigmatize, talk about a word from Mr. Elizondo on what he says a lot, but destigmatize the topic. And so he wants to encourage more pilots to come forward. That, I think, answers your question from the U.S. Navy side, where he went on the record and said he was surprised, but essentially encouraged or excited about it because it may help more pilots come forward. Now, before that statement, I will say this, Stephen. I would be surprised if they didn't think that this would be a big story on thinking this through. You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't it be a viral story if the Navy goes on the record and says, we have no idea what these are? I would think that the Navy is going to really assume it'll probably hit the mainstream media, at least eventually, because that is a big statement for them to make. So I think that they were probably expecting it. But then again, he goes on the record and say that he was really surprised. So I'll punch it again. Never assume anything.
Right. And other question. You mentioned about that video being leaked out in 2007.
Yeah.
And I was reading what you showed up there. They said the Navy said they couldn't. Too much time has passed, and there was 5,000 crew members on the ship. Did they think that leak of the video came off from somebody on the ship?
That's correct. Yes. because it was in their investigation, so they must have investigated it to some length. In their investigation, they found out that it was passed around on the ship. And so at that point, whomever was the original source, if they could even determine that, all of a sudden you turn one person into many, and according to them, they were, and I'll go back to it really quick, they were essentially, it would be an impossible scenario to try and figure out how this happened, and for them to try and figure this out. The exact quote was, given, and I'm going to read this here for those who can see it on screen, given the time since recording, approximately 5 years, the widespread distribution of the recording within the ship at the time of recording, and the size of the crew, approximately 5,000, it was determined that there was no way to accurately determine who might have released the video. So obviously, once it was passed around and they determined it was passed all over the place, there was no way for them to determine that long after it happened who actually was the source of starting to pass it around, and then essentially someone who did get it passed to them put it on the internet. So I think that was the issue there, that they just had 5,000 suspects and there was no way that they could figure out who or what did it.
I've never seen that video till TTSA released it. Did you know about that video?
I did, yeah. Well, no. Let me rephrase that. I was aware of the leak after the fact, but no, I was not aware that there was a leak when TTSA dropped the FLIR 1 video. So that was the first time I saw it too. I admit that. For those fans of Above Top Secret, my guess is you probably saw it on there if you read all of the threads. It is a thread that you can still visit today. I did link it over in my article that you can visit and kind of see how it was written, because there's a much bigger story there. But that was in 2007. So for those fans of Above Top Secret, were probably aware of it and had seen it. But me personally, no, not until TTSA dropped it. We saw it on the YouTube channel, New York Times, and then it was about 2 or 3 weeks before people started coming out with the fact that it was the same video, that it had been on this German production company web server back in 2007, had since disappeared. But for those who aren't aware, there was an interview done by one of the bloggers who wrote the article, and kudos to them. It's a long German name I can't pronounce, but that being said, it's linked in the article and credited as such. But they reached out to the present day German production company, which is called Vision Unlimited. And they asked him, how did this video...
Right. You have that stated on your Black Vault.
Correct, yeah. No, I'm just giving it to people that are watching that haven't seen it yet. But essentially, Vision Unlimited said, we have no idea how it happened. So it was very interesting on how that unfolded. But nonetheless, yeah, that was the first time that I had seen that video.
And my last question is, what's your next move?
Well,
what...
My next move, well, I do have a couple things that may be planned here that hopefully will be published soon. I hate teasing unless I tease something and it's like an hour away, I'll tease it. So I don't want to give away too much, just simply because I don't know how it's going to unfold. What I will say is, what is next in a broader sense for me is you got to keep pushing, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. I'm going to keep in contact with the Navy and keep in contact with other agencies as well. And obviously these official statements are great in the short term, but in the long term, we have to utilize those to file FOIA requests. That obviously, these statements played a huge role in FOIA requests that I filed through last week when I got the statements. And obviously you sit down, you digest it, and you go, okay, how can I utilize this statement? And that's another thing that I think some people don't realize, Stephen. I believe you will, but some people that might be listening, like, why does it matter if the Navy goes on the record and gives an official statement? And the reason is, from a legal standpoint, that is then sourceable, just like a document. And an official statement then goes on the record. So unless they come out and say, we were wrong, which is, it happens, but unless they do that, you can then use that official statement in a FOIA document. And that is something that you can use in FOIA appeals, FOIA requests. So again, all of those listening or watching right now that are utilizing the FOIA, just know those statements are incredibly powerful when it comes to a legal document. And that's something that you can insert into your letter, utilize it, and get more information out. So that's what's next for me, Stephen, is to just keep pushing on both fronts. Some things I can do through public affairs, other things I have to do through FOIA, but they work in tandem for me, and I love pushing. So we'll see what else I can come out with.
And I appreciate it, and I thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Stephen. I really do appreciate your support. Thank you. For those of you still watching live, I appreciate you doing that and taking the time. You can see that there are call-in numbers, a toll-free call-in line, also a text. If you want to text your message, I'm going to read another one here. Well, I know who that is, but I'm going to have to put you on hold there. I'm going to read a text message. But if you want to text, it's 661-888-2568. And that is your text. And the call-in line, 866-856-9722. For that caller, just sit tight for me because I'm going to get to this text message, and I'll get to you, I promise. Here is one, no name. Do you think this has anything to do with Space Force? And what do you think Space Force will comprise of? A actual Space Force at a ground-based force controlling satellites or drones? What are your thoughts? If I follow you correctly with the Space Force, that obviously is a big rumor right now. It's not one that I really buy into. I mean, I think with the Space Force objectives and so on and so forth, I think what a lot of people don't realize is we've kind of had a Space Force per se. We've had the United States Space Command for many, many years. I think what Trump's vision was a little bit different than how it got played in the media, but regardless, things are starting to unfold. I personally don't think that this plays a role in that. I truly believe that the Space Force objective is to watch the threats from above. And yes, that means Iran, that may mean China, that may mean Russia. But the next 9/11 is essentially either going to come digitally or digitally in the sense that it's going to hijack one of our satellites or multiple satellites, potentially use an ASAT weapon or an anti-satellite weapon to bring down our communications. It's scary how reliant we are on technology, which includes our assets in space. And so I truly believe that the Space Force thing is not necessarily looking out for threats, but seriously looking in for threats because we're really vulnerable. We really are. And so I think that that's what we really have to look into and be concerned by. So I don't believe that the UFO/UAP thing plays a role in the Space Force. But it might. I mean, again, there's a lot of uncharted territory when it comes to the Space Force simply because we don't have the information yet. We don't see how it's going to unfold. So don't see a connection there, but I do appreciate the text. Now, this should be an interesting call. Sorry to keep you on hold. Who's this?
Danny Silva.
Danny Silva. I'm surprised to see your name pop up on my caller ID. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, ma'am. Great job with the story. We have our issues.
We do?
Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, we do. Of course we do.
All right. For those who don't, Danny, just hold on one second. For those of you who don't know, Danny runs the Silva Record. Correct me if I'm wrong, Danny. It's silvarecord.com, correct?
Yeah.
And so Danny has a blog. He often reports on TTSA-related matters. When he says that we have our issues, he's absolutely right. For those of you who follow on Twitter, you will probably, well, used to anyway, because there is a huge wall between us now on Twitter in the form of a block on both ends, Danny, not just my end, thank you. And that being said, Danny, what's your question or comment or whatever you'd like to add?
It's a good job that you did.
I appreciate that.
I was kind of, I think the definition of UAP is a little ambiguous that Roger got back. But regardless, this has been the biggest push since last May, the New York Times story since last May. But I just wanted to call in, tell you good job. Hopefully, I really would wish that you would cut out the social media war stuff. And the unprofessional comments, it comes from a lot of different places, not just you. But if that stuff was cut out, I think it would be a better place for everybody.
Well, Danny, I'm willing to have a conversation with you, unless you got to go. But the short of it, when you talk about the social media war stuff, I've said it on this before. I mean, I fully admit there are certain situations where I am no peach on Twitter, but you have to admit that when I am no peach on Twitter, it is generally well deserved by the other party.
I don't think so. No, I wouldn't say so. A lot of it you start. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is, sure. And I feel the same way. I get sucked into it. Someone makes a bad comment, and then it sucks us in. There is a whole lot of stuff that you start too.
I don't want to turn this into a match back and forth. I mean, people aren't watching this for that. But I will say, because this is where I want to have a conversation with you. There is a huge. I don't know how long you've listened, but there is a huge divide between, I would say, your camp, which is very pro TTSA, and I don't want to label you. Do you agree with that or disagree?
I would label myself as pro. I would label you as anti. I think the camps are hard to always kind of quantify, but yeah, I mean, I think for as much as I'm pro, I think you're also anti. I know you would probably say you're not, and you're just calling it straight. But,
okay, let me ask you: was the Navy statements this week, did they help TTSA or hurt them?
I mean, that one statement helped them, and that's why I wanted to call in and thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but here's my point. So who brought that statement out and who got it? I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but I'm trying to prove a point here. Who got that?
I mean, bro, you don't need to ask me who got it. This whole show has been.
I'm just trying. Okay, I'm not trying to argue. I'm really trying to prove a point, Danny. I'm trying to have a conversation with you. So, who brought that information forward?
Bro, you did.
Okay,
the whole show has been about you doing it.
All right, kick back, Danny. I'm trying to have a conversation. So, the anti-TTSA guy that you're labeling me as brought forward some of the best evidence that added credibility to them. How do you label me anti? And that's a genuine question. I'd love to know.
It's from numerous statements over and over again. I mean, come on. Like, just looking at your tweets, someone sent me, like, from today, you're talking about Tom DeLonge saying he's lying, and if you did that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on.
Wait. Tom DeLonge, I've never said Tom DeLonge was lying. What do you, come on. This is what I've harped on you about, is making stuff up.
No, you quoted. I'm not making it up. You quoted. You should put your tweet on the screen. You quoted Tom, and said that Tom said that he was making stuff up, and if you. Oh,
that's not. Whoa. Okay, all right. That's fair. I never said that. That's his quote. He's the one that says he made stuff up.
But you highlighted it to make him look bad because you're anti.
Whoa. Let me ask you this way: if I said that I made stuff up, wouldn't you call me out on that? That's his quote. That's not my quote. I didn't say he was a liar making stuff up.
Why did you bring that up in the first place?
Because he admits that he makes stuff up. Come on.
Okay.
So if I said, hey, Danny, no, I'm not going to turn this into a match because the chat room's getting upset. So here's what I would say to you. If I just told you, you know what, half of the statements that I just read to you from the U.S. Navy, I made up. But it's the only way that I would get people to listen to me. Would you think that I was credible or not?
I mean, why did you bring up the Tom comment?
Whoa. Just answer my question, Dan. I've answered everything that you've thrown at me. So please answer one for me. If I said that I made stuff up so people would listen to me, what would you think I'm credible or not? Just yes or no.
Was that from the WikiLeaks?
No, Danny, this is what he said on a K-Rock interview. For those that don't know, Tom DeLonge was interviewed on K-Rock. I'll see if I could pull it up easily, but I probably can't.
I admit it. It's not a good look, but it was an old comment.
Okay,
and you brought it up today.
An old comment that was like like 2 months ago.
Okay, so why did you bring it up today in like a battle or whatever?
Don't you bring up stuff that I said like 2 years ago?
So I'm just saying. So it just shows that you're anti today. So, you weren't trying to. Okay.
Well, I think the chat today. I think that the chat room's getting a little bit upset at this, so I don't want to bore them to death. I'm willing to have the conversation with you, Danny, but you still haven't answered my question. If I said that I made up half of what part of 20%, 30%, it doesn't matter. If I made it up, That's his words, not mine. If I made up
He
those
said
statements,
half of what he said?
hold on, Danny, please. If I said, wait, what did you just say?
Did you say that Tom said he made up half of what he said?
No, I'm asking you a question, Danny. You got to listen to what I'm saying. I'm not quoting Tom DeLonge other than saying he said he made things up. His words, not mine. So the question still stands, Danny. If I said that part of what I just gave to everybody right now was made up, would you find me credible or not?
I don't know. I think the Tom comment was probably you're taking it out of context.
How is it out of context? He said that he made things up to get people to talk to him.
Yeah, like military people, not.
Oh, that makes it okay,
right? And not necessarily, and I'm not saying that, but you asked me how are you anti, and I said you brought that up today, months later.
So I'm anti. I didn't spin it.
You brought it up to make them look bad. I'm just saying that's how you're anti. I mean, you're obviously anti, bro. That's obvious, but I called in because
it is.
I think it's okay. And, I have a lot of friends. You said you've lost a lot of friends over this. I haven't lost any friends over this, and I'm friends with a lot of people that are anti. So I think if some of the comments on social media, some of the wars were put to the side, you and me even could be friends. And, it could all be good. Sorry, I'm outside. But that was the point of my thing.
Gotcha.
I'm friends with a lot of people that are very skeptical, and I've never lost any friends, and I don't think you need to either. If you kind of just scrolled it back a little bit, took a deep breath, maybe when you're on social media. I need to do that sometimes myself. And but good job on the Navy comment, and this has been a great push for To the Stars, and
from the anti guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Danny. Well, I appreciate it. I'm willing to answer any question because I'm not trying to cut you off, but the chat room wants me to hang up. So if you have a solid question, I'll address anything you'd like. And then I have the quote on screen, so I'm going to let everyone decide for themselves what DeLonge meant. But I'm not trying to cut you off.
The question was, why are you anti, and why did you bring that up? So that was why I brought that up.
I think I've already addressed the anti thing, which is kind of silly. I think in closing, Tom DeLonge himself said what I had researched, came out with, published, and what was picked up by the media is unprecedented. So if you think that he's going to say that, if you think he's going to say that about somebody who's anti-TTSA or Tom DeLonge, I think you may want to fact check that a little bit. But before I hang up, do you have any more?
No, I think it's a common thing, the anti-argument, and I think many people, including maybe even people into the Stars, would think that you were anti them, but that wasn't the point of my.
Well, I hope that they one time will tell me that. I'm here if they want to tell me that over the telephone or in an email, but they ignore me, Danny. So if they think I'm anti, that's fine. But sadly, I think I've proven I'm not.
Anti stuff aside, why don't we drop the social media war stuff? I mean, many times you're coming onto my site, even though you don't follow me, and you're commenting on my stuff. And then I end up responding to you, and then it gets bad.
Yeah, so, here's the last thing. Here's the last thing that I'll say for that. I think you have to understand how Twitter works. So if my follower or someone I follow comments on your stuff, it'll pop up on my feed, Danny. So you're accusing. Oh, Danny, can I talk, man? I let you talk. So I'm gonna go ahead and hang up, Danny. But I will address that. But I've been trying to have a conversation with you there, buddy. But you're clearly stuck on a narrative that I'm like the anti-TTSA.
No, I'm not.
All right, you have the last word, and then I'm gonna hang up like the chat room wants me to do. So you get the last word.
I was calling in to comment and to compliment you. I'm just saying, cut the social media stuff out. You can call me personally anytime you want. We can bury the hatchet, but just cut out the social media warrior stuff, man. We all need to. You're one of the worst people at it, and that's why you've lost so many friends. I've never lost any friends, but just cut it out.
So I lost all my friends because of TTSA. There's like two, Danny.
Those are your words. You said you lost a lot of friends over there.
Yeah, lost friends. I didn't say a lot. And
okay, friends. You lost friends. I've never lost any friends, bro.
That's awesome,
It doesn't have to be like that.
I'm happy for you. I really am.
It doesn't have to be like that. Let's drop the crap and let's move forward. And good job with the Navy.
All right, Danny. Well, you take care of yourself.
All right, call me, man. You got my number now. You can call me.
All right, Danny. You have a good day.
All right, bye.
All right, so here is the quote from, I'm the anti-TTSA guy, apparently. But yeah, the war, I'm sorry that it kept so long on the phone there. I know that people wanted me to hang up on him. I know if I hung up on him or cut that short, obviously be attacked on social media. He's one that I don't understand. He obviously has that narrative about me with the anti-TTSA thing, and yet I come out with the information. Where I would have went with that conversation, and I hope maybe he one day writes about it, is these official statements obviously have power. He just said it. He called to say good job, yet he's mad at all the other official statements that TTSA has not addressed. Who knows? Anyway, UFO Joe, give him a shout out here. He painstakingly translates interviews and so on and so forth. I have verified the transcript is accurate, but if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, a question went to him. How did he, meaning DeLong, get members of the government to speak with him when most everybody else had struck out? Was it due to his tenacity? Tom DeLong, this is a quote. It really kind of was. The very beginning of it, I was playing a lot of very important people off of each other. It was really kind of funny. I was just making things up. I was like, hey, I'm talking to so-and-so. And I got that guy to say, hey, I'm talking to so-and-so. So the host of the show, Kevin, says, and you weren't talking to anybody? And DeLong says, oh, I kind of was, but it was more like handshakes and hellos, you know? So in essence, DeLong wanted something, and in his words, he thought it was funny that he just made things up and got his way. That is why I bring up quotes like that, because if you're willing to go on the record, like I asked Danny and he refused to answer, if I told you guys that in order for me to get you to tune into this live stream, and in order for you guys to listen to me, that I made up part of the Navy statements, wouldn't you tune out? You probably would never watch again. And I think that the fact that he won't answer that is fairly indicative. There's no spin here. I invite you all to go to that website, ufojoe.net. Again, compliments to him for creating these transcripts. Joe is probably not a fan of mine just by social media interactions. I know that he is fairly supportive of TTSA, not quite like Danny, but is fairly supportive, doesn't like all of what I have written, but that's okay. I like to shout out people who deserve it, and he does these painstaking transcripts, and so that's it. So I invite you to read the whole thing, or watch the video. I think it's on YouTube, of his K-Rock interview on the radio. He's making things up. To a researcher, of course, I'm going to point that out. But hey, that's just me looking into people's words. Danny's comment about this was so long ago. Why was I bringing it out? Let me just look at the date. July. So July 18th was the transcript. Let me see if there's a date of the show. July 17. So, yeah, 2 months. So, I don't know how much would change 2 months from now, but it's still relevant 2 years from now, unless Tom DeLong says he was lying. So if you speak the truth, it's true 2 months, 2 years after. So let me see. I think that is all of the text messages. Feel free to call in or text. If not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Rojas needs to call in next. Yes, I believe that you are right, Eldon Sword. Rojas is always welcome to call in. He is one that I would actually very much like to talk to on here. I think that there are questions that hopefully he wouldn't dodge like Danny did. I think he can have an intelligent conversation. We definitely wouldn't agree, but I think that he should absolutely address some of the fabricated stories that have been said about me personally, for those who have watched this before. So you can see it's not pretty in some of this UFO land. There's people don't like me if you start researching things. And thankfully, this week apparently they're okay with me, but next week it'll be something else. And so I think that it's sad, but I think these conversations need to happen. I think people need to be able to address certain questions, certain issues. Did I steal Danny's lollipop? Probably in a past life, maybe through sand or something. I thought I saw some questions up here, and I'm sorry that the chat room is always hard. Yeah, you guys, I'm gonna have fun reading this chat later. So I can't find the questions that I have seen above. So if any UFO land sucks, but you make it better, John. Thank you. I appreciate that UFO issue. I wouldn't say it totally sucks. I think that there are some definite aspects. I mean, I appreciate Danny's call. I would have loved to have had a longer conversation with him, but as you can tell, I think when you play a different scenario, use the exact same facts but change the names, all of a sudden it's a different story. That's why he wouldn't address whether or not I would be credible if I said that I was making things up. The people like that, not just to pick on Danny, but people like that would be all over me if I were to do that. Those are the characters in the UFO field that just got to go. You have to hold everybody to the same standard or lack thereof. You know, I mean, it's a even playing field. We're all on the same team, or at least we should be. I am not an anti-TTSA guy. I believe that I've proven that. What's crazy is the anti-TTSA guy just gave the biggest shot of credibility to the organization. So to really start throwing that, I could have hid that, by the way. I mean, if I really was anti-TTSA, I could have spun that. I could have just not published an article. I mean, if you really truly have an agenda, I think people have to realize if you're the only one that got that statement at that point, you have the power to just not give it out to the public. I didn't have to write an article, but that is evidence. This is all part of the story. And I think that why I have to justify it, I'm not sure. But just to kind of offer that, I mean, if I really did have that anti-objective, I wouldn't have written the article. And it's quite possible, since no one has asked up until the point I did, that quite possibly no one would have. I'm not saying that I did something no one else would have thought of. That's not what I'm saying. But it's been almost 2 years, and I'd love to know how many people tried to get the Navy to go on the record. I don't know. I don't know how many, but regardless, you know, I think that that's something that we have to ask, you know, and the whole anti thing, I think, is just tiresome. So let me get this call. Hey there, who's this? Hello? Hello? Is this my first crank call? Can you hear me? Hello? Maybe they butt dialed. Maybe that's a big possibility. All right, last chance. Are you there? All right. Caller, if just by chance it was a bad cell phone connection, feel free to give me a call back. Here's a question from the chat room. John, how are we going to know if UFOs are ours or aliens when there is full disclosure? Well, Christine, a couple different things there. I don't think full disclosure is going to happen, simply for a couple different reasons. But there has to be something to disclose. And so if you mean that more popular narrative that disclosure is simply aliens are here and we're talking to them and communicating and we've known about them for decades, so the government comes clean. If that's what you mean, I just don't think it's going to happen. Disclosure that they're out there or being here or so on, and I see you calling back, so I'm gonna have to put you on hold. The likelihood of that happening is very nil, but again, I go back to that, there has to be something to disclose. And I think part of the national security aspect to all of this is the fact that they don't have an answer. And the Navy really, I've said that for quite a few years now, but the Navy really kind of put that into reality mode for me. If the statements are all accurate and the Navy truly doesn't know what these are and they're not classified technology and they find it better to just, you know, say they're unidentified but they know what they are. If all of that is true, it plays into my hypothesis anyway, that they just don't know. And that in itself is the national security risk. That again, that most powerful Navy and most powerful military on the planet is seeing technology or a phenomena, what they call it, a phenomena in the air that shows intelligence, but they just don't know. They don't know what it is. They can't understand it. Now, this wasn't in the official statement, but what comes along with it? You can't combat it. You can't compete with it. It has technology and capability that you don't have today as the most powerful military and Navy in the world. Now, obviously, that's stretching it a little bit. That's not the official word, but that is the obvious way to go from here, is that in itself would be a national security risk. which is why disclosure on any level I don't think would make sense, because you would not be able to handle, no, not you personally or those watching, but I think as a collective whole, people wouldn't be able to handle that the most powerful Navy, most powerful military is being met with by something in the sky that we just have no idea what it is. And so again, then you have to snowball that into, we can't combat it, we can't fight it, we can't communicate with it. So, you have to assume that disclosure is going to happen for that to be true, and I just don't see it. All right, let me get to this call. Let me see. Hey there, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Hi there, who's this?
This is Jimmy D.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm glad I can hear you this time. What can I do for you?
Yes, I was wondering if it's a thing that we should perhaps put some pressure on the CIA, that they should announce that there would be an amnesty for anybody who wanted to talk about these things. And if they refuse to give that amnesty, press them on why.
Well, I think now that we're seeing some congressional and senatorial interest in this, that politicians are going on the record, it depends on what they're going to do next after these classified briefings, because a lot of times when inquiries are held or are underway and hearings are held, sometimes that amnesty is given, where if they invite people in that they want the truth, so they'll say nothing will happen to you, but come in and testify about what happened to you or so on. And then also keeping in mind that could potentially be behind closed doors in a classified setting. So now that we see that interest, maybe that will happen. Can the public push for that? In my opinion, probably not. The public has a long history going back quite a few decades of pushing the government for answers of any kind. Maybe not necessarily, hey, give people amnesty per se, but obviously when you touch on the UFO topic, and the public has in the last quite a few decades, the government and military largely just pushes back. That's why this news is so big this week, because for the most part, they just push back and they say there's nothing to this, go away, stop asking questions. So can the public do that now? I don't know.
It would seem to me that if we could get somebody on the record saying that, no, we will refuse to give out amnesty, that would be a real big thing.
That if they refuse to give it out, that would be a big thing?
Right, because then everybody would want to know, why are you refusing to give amnesty?
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be, in my opinion, hard for them to go on the record and even address amnesty for such an issue. You know what I mean? And with public affairs offices, this is a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, because with public affairs offices, a lot of times when you read a news article or see something on television, a lot of times it's a very quick blurb, but they'll say the Department of Defense declined to comment or failed to respond for requests for comment. Why I bring that up is that is a tactic. The tactic is just don't address it at all, and then you don't have the public push. If you address it and say, we will not give amnesty for those who want to push forward, that opens the door for people like all of us to say, aha, there's something to this, I knew it. And so it behooves them to just
that kind
not
of is
comment.
My point. I guess maybe what you're saying is that it would have to be in some sort of a live question and answer period or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That somebody could just blurt out and say, if you really are interested in having the people know, why don't you declare amnesty now? Maybe you'd have to say, we're only going to declare amnesty for stuff that's older than 10 years to make sure that people would blurt out stuff that's current secret.
Yeah.
But I think that if they were, asked and put on the spot, why don't you give out amnesty for people who want to tell, I guess basically what I'm talking about is things that we've seen, at the National Press Club, stuff like that. People have actually worked on various programs that would blow the lid off this thing, that they would kind of say, well, yeah, I guess we do want to know, so we will declare amnesty.
Yeah.
And if they refuse to do that, then I think people would have a much better understanding of whether or not they are, in fact, still trying to keep the lid on this.
Yeah. Well, I think to address it real quick, getting slightly away from the amnesty thing, but they definitely are, by their own admission, keeping a lid on it. Keep in mind that the United States Navy has already put out on the record, and this was a couple months ago, that anything related to unidentified aerial phenomena or the guidelines that they reissued this year are to remain classified. So anything that comes in, the Navy is not going to release it. So that is an on-the-record statement. So not quite amnesty, but regardless, it does go to your question on whether or not they're going to admit keeping a lid on it. That's already happened months ago, and you can look at the reporting by Politico on that. I believe it was Politico that broke the UFO information will remain classified story, and see that the Navy has gone on the record and says the public is not going to get anything about the topic. So sadly, I think that they are still going to continue to keep a lid on it, regardless of what we just got this last week.
And so what you're telling me is that they're already admitting that they are keeping information from the public.
That's correct. Yep. Yeah, they don't hide from that fact, and that's on the record. That's not something that's rumored. Those are official statements that came in.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for taking my call, John.
No problem, sir. Thanks for calling in. A couple text messages to get here, and then I'm going to have to start wrapping it up. I haven't heard you mention the interview of a pilot from, I believe, the Tic Tac video. It was on the Fighter Pilot podcast. Have you heard of that? Yes, you're absolutely right. That was an interview done by David Fravor, the pilot from the Tic Tac incident. And so definitely check that out. It's a pretty compelling interview. I did not mention it, so I'm glad you brought it up. But obviously he has spoken about that incident prior. Got this question from Adam. Hey, Adam, thanks for texting in. Any pending FOIA requests on this topic coming? Absolutely, quite a few. The topic as a whole when it comes to ATIP, which is that secret Pentagon UFO study that we often talk about, and also the Navy connections to all of the stories about UAPs and stuff like that. This spawned quite a few different requests just the last week alone. However, from October 2017 to date, there are 100 times as many as what I sent out in the last week. So yeah, there's a lot of pending stuff. There's a lot of things I'm pushing on both the FOIA front and the public affairs front. So we'll see what happens. I got a call here. Let me do one more question. Hey, Coley. So this comes in from a longtime listener, Coley. I'm wondering if they ever admitted that the UAP/UFO/UAV is linked to ET. Elizondo has never said ET. No one is talking about the operators of the crafts. Thanks, Coley. Yeah, Coley, I don't know if you were here in the beginning. The Navy did address this in generality by saying that they are not addressing it, that essentially that they won't try and give a hypothesis or some kind of idea of what these things are, other than that designation of unidentified aerial phenomena. To Mr. Elizondo's credit, I guess, he has not gone over the line and said that they were ET related. The general public definitely fills in the blanks on that one, and even some of the tabloid media outlets as well. He has not. He stoked the flames a little bit by saying on Tucker Carlson that they had pieces of a UFO. That, this is where it gets a little bit dicey because, number one, you have official Pentagon statements that says he had no responsibility on the program. So if the statements that were made by the Navy are unprecedented to Tom DeLonge, we have to address that point. Now, I bring that up not to put salt in the wound, but rather make my next point of how do we know that he really was involved to that level to know that there were crashed pieces of something. But then on top of that, where did that information go in October of 2017 when he stood up in front of everybody and announced this program? Where did that information go in the countless interviews and television and so on when he was doing that? Where did that information go? I bring that up because that's a concern and a red flag to me, which, some people may not care about. But information and the truth like this is not like a fine wine, right? It shouldn't get better as time goes on. if you want to think that that information was classified, that's very well possible. But it would not likely be declassified when he retired in October of 2017 and went on stage with Tom DeLonge. It would likely not be declassified from that point to the point when he said it on Tucker Carlson. So the chances of that are nil. So the classification comment to me that he just couldn't talk about it in October, but he could on Tucker Carlson because it was declassified, I just don't see it. Could they have received pieces of something? Absolutely. In fact, I would be surprised if they didn't. The whole root of the program was to look at technology that was potentially 40 years into the future. That was all tied back to public documents that you can still get. I've got them on theblackvault.com, but it was all about the OSAP contract that was awarded to Bigelow Aerospace. So I'd be surprised if they weren't looking at technology, figuring out maybe something that fell from space, so maybe a space vehicle of some kind that Russia had up, and try and analyze it and see what their capabilities are, what are they making. So a piece of a UFO, I think we have to look at it for what it probably is. But I think the whole hiding behind security classifications and say something like, yes, we have pieces of a UFO, but I can't say anything more because of my security classification, I think is theatrical. I think that we have to start to question some of those claims. So to my caller, I'm sorry to keep you on hold for a couple minutes there. Who's this?
This is Scott. How you doing? I live here in Utah.
Hi, Scott from Utah. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, so I'm actually pretty kind of floored over this whole thing. You know, I listen to Alex, I listen to you, and I've read Amy Jacobson's book on Area 51. And the UFO topic is really important to me because I've seen like way too many. And what I think is really interesting is what they're showing us is just absolute garbage. I mean, I was in the Air Force. They have way high-tech cameras, and they're showing us this grainy footage. But it's really interesting that they're still showing us this. And the reason why I'm calling in is because I think like the United States was the last one to admit that there's UFOs, where everyone else was saying that, hey, we're seeing this stuff. Like, you know, Belgium was talking about it. You know, Mexico's been talking about it. Everyone's been talking about it, and we're the last people are acknowledging that their existence.
I agree with you. World governments have largely been more open on the topic in recent years and even decades versus the United States. So they're very late to the game, I should say. But I would say if this was a competition, the U.S. Navy just kind of trumped some of the other governments by starting to label it a phenomena of some kind, starting to look at actual evidence that exhibits technology that we may not even have today. That starts to open up a slew of other questions. So regardless of them being late to the game, they just added a lot to the story by saying, you know, what they did. But you're absolutely right. World governments have absolutely been more open about this topic than America. No disagreement there.
No, absolutely. They've been testing the waters. Like, remember that blue thing that shot? They said they launched an ICBM across the country. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And you know, we saw that here in Utah, and they were saying that it was photographed in California. But anyhow, I also wonder if this is also tied in with the whole Space Force thing. So maybe this could be, they're saying, hey, this stuff actually exists. This is why we need a Space Force, because something's going on. It also reminds me of Childhood's End, where they're just kind of like, just testing the waters, how sleepy people are.
Yeah.
But, I've got, for me, there's just no doubt. I hear these conversations all the time, and this and that. But it's like I've seen way too many UFOs. And it's not like the government's like, oh, we're going to pick on Scott. We're going to see what he has to think and see what he has to say. Because I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I'll be, sky watching. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's that?
Yeah.
and with other folks, like, it's not some lone nut in the woods.
Yeah, I going back to your Space Force comment, I don't know if you were listening in. Someone had submitted a text question on the Space Force and whether or not I think it's connected. In a nutshell, I personally don't think that it is. I think that the Space Force is going to have a very specific job and operation and protect us from a very, very serious threat. I mean, I've got a lot of documents on the Black Vault about how serious some of these threats are when satellites are taken down and digital infrastructures are infiltrated and stuff like that, which obviously ties into our space assets. So I think that really is going to ultimately be the mission. I know a lot of people want to say that the mission is going to be looking out at threats versus looking in. Yeah, that may be an aspect to it, but I don't see it. Nor do I think that they would spin this narrative for something like the Space Force. I mean, as we know, if a president wants something or politicians want it, they'll find the money to do it, whether it be black money or not. So I don't think that they have to spin a public narrative, because did the public really ever get behind the Space Force other than say it was really cool and we needed it? But it's not like we had this massive vote that said, hey, based on the revelations of these UAPs and UAPs and UFOs and Navy statements and this and that, we need a Space Force. So that's why I really don't see the evidence to connect the two, at least not yet.
Oh, that's fine, totally. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I've been hearing rumors that the Navy says that they've only really kind of charted 10% of the ocean. Have you heard that, or is it totally off base? I'm
sorry, it kind of broke up. That the Navy what of the ocean?
The Navy says that they only really know about 10% of the ocean. Like it's just really big.
Yeah, no, it is massive, and I think that's more of a scientific piece of information versus just the Navy, meaning there are, I don't know what the exact percentage is nowadays. I think it's a little higher than 10%, but there is a high percentage of the ocean that we just haven't really explored yet or mapped. And so, yeah, I mean, we're getting a little bit away from the UFO/UAP debate, but in the same respect, and especially with the Navy, and we'll see if maybe there's a story about this coming up. But there are rumors and stories that the U.S. Navy not only sees things in the sky, but sees things in our ocean. And in our oceans, that there's things that you just cannot explain. And they call them USOs, or unidentified submersible objects. No, that's not an official acronym, at least not yet anyway. Not any statement that I've received yet. But that is a very important topic. But going back to your point, yeah, there's a mass amount of our oceans that we just have no idea what's there. We haven't mapped it. We haven't explored it. And, as time goes on, maybe we'll make some more discoveries.
Yeah, I think it's just so interesting that the Navy is the one that's bringing this up, not the Air Force.
Yeah, hopefully that will also change here in the coming weeks and months. I think that in regards to the Air Force, I think it's time for them to address a little bit about what this is. And it'll be very interesting to see how they coincide with the Navy, because the Navy has been very, very open about it, at least as open as, as they've normally been. They're incredibly open compared to what they've been in the past. Still very, very classified, obviously. They're still very secretive about it. But regardless, they've really gone on the record. So I think that it's time for another military branch to address something. Hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll see something.
I absolutely agree. Because, the Air Force is consistently flying, here in Utah, it's a military state, and there's consistent flights going on. And where I live, I've seen things just right off my porch, and then I've also seen aircraft, kind of like going after it. So, these little videos they have, they're not unique. I know that they have a treasure trove of data, because they're constantly flying. That's what Amy Jacobson was saying in her book Area 51 with the U2 pilots. They were just trying to fly to Russia. You can only imagine what they saw. Of course, the Foo Fighters back in World War II. And this subject is so old, and it's for me, it's very, I'm happy to hear this, like Peter Levenda was just saying, they're just doing this slow little drip, which kind of reminds me of Childhood's End.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully the coming weeks and months, more stuff's going to come out from the military. We'll be able to address it and go from there. I'm going to deal with one more question in the chat room. I'm going to have to wrap this up, but I really do appreciate your call.
Hey, you have a great day. I love your work.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much for watching and listening. One more question from the chat room here from UFO Shill. Why do we rule out aliens automatically? There may have been a bigger context in the chat room that I just didn't follow. But if that was addressed to me, I'll just say outright, we can't rule it out unless irrefutable evidence produces something that disproves the alien theory, that is just as plausible as these being top secret drones. So as an investigator, we all have to just kind of deal with every possibility that's out there and start ruling them out one by one until you're left with, I don't know, one or 2 or 5 or whatever scenarios. And so the alien theory, I don't think it's been ruled out. I think scientifically there's a strong support system for it, meaning the cosmos, the size of it, the science that we do know, the discoveries that we're making. The bridge, however, is then connecting that extraterrestrial life, which probably is out there somewhere. Are they intelligent enough to go from there to here? And that is that bridge that we can't really address yet. But Einstein was wrong too. So as much as we think we understand about science or our oceans or whatever, sadly we really just don't, and we get to learn that lesson all the time, every time, it seems like. Science is never right. That being said, hey, look, it's been 2 hours. I'm a little bit over what I thought I was going to be. I vowed not to go 2 hours, but hey, here we are. I really appreciate all of those phone calls. Even Danny Silva, who called in to say that I was the anti-TTSA guy. I'm always open to intelligent debate and dialogue. So anybody who's watching, you don't have to agree with me to call in. As you can see, I will take everyone's call. It's not a problem. Just make sure it is a two-way conversation and, be nice. That being said, thank you all for tuning in. I really do appreciate your time. This was a big week for UFOs, ufology, whatever you want to call it. I'm glad to have played a small role in that. It was really exciting to see. And I do hope at the end of the day that divide that is obvious, that you saw it here unfold with one of my callers. It's obviously there, that regardless of the information coming out, regardless of the Black Vault bringing you unedited but verifiable information, somehow I'm the anti-TTSA guy. I don't get it. I don't understand it, but I want to, so I'm willing to have those conversations whenever people want to call in. So make sure you click that subscribe button that is somewhere down there. Make sure that you turn the notifications on. That way, every time I go live, you guys will be notified, and hopefully you'll tune in, and we'll have some great debate. Yes, there are more things coming. Yes, there are more stories coming. When? Stay tuned. Thanks for listening.